I think that was kind of one of my earliest signs of like, okay, it's actually better for me to be alone than to be around people who make me feel alone.
Hi, welcome back to Town Hall, a Black Queer podcast, the podcast where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity. Today's season 3 opener is Lonely Hearts, Tales of Unrequited Longing and Loneliness. Pep, do you have any, have you ever been in an unrequited love
When have I
situation?
not? I mean, I think that's the situation. It's never been equal. And maybe that's not too unique. Maybe like everybody, like all relationships end either because something happens or something happens. And so
Yeah,
when something happens, then maybe it's because it's not so equal. Like everybody's not on the same page at one
yeah.
point at least at the end. And so, yes, I have. And you know, it turns out that I'm always left with the love of my friends and people like you. I mean, not that you're not my friends, like people like you.
My friends
Also,
and
people like
also
you.
Bob the Drag Queen.
And so, Valentine's Day, I think this is the perfect day to explore the complexities of love and loneliness on Valentine's Day. Yeah. So here we are. Lonely. Is this Galentine?
Yeah, I think Valentine's Day can feel lonely if you don't have someone with you at that time. And sometimes it can feel lonely if you have
Well, I
someone
was
with
just going
you.
to ask that because I have
Sometimes
been
it
in
can feel someone with
relationships
you, it still
before,
feel
and I
lonely.
remember of all the things that I can remember, the one thing that I remember very, very like being shocked by is the feeling when I'm single, like the feeling of I wish I was with somebody and yada 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 yada. And then when I've been in relationships, I remember thinking, damn, it was so much easier when I was single. Like that's like the number one thing that I
Yeah.
remember feeling and thinking.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense too. You know what I mean? I mean, listen, some people are celebrating with a special someone or flying solo. Whether that's you, no matter where you fall on that spectrum, this episode is for you. So grab your chocolates, your roses, or a cozy blanket because you're about to serve up some heartfelt stories and discussions. All right.
Okay, so our first guest is Isaac, who is a musician, an advocate, and host of Chocolate, the podcast. And yes, you want to listen to this podcast. On this podcast, they delve very deep into topics related to being Black and queer, such as colorism and Black fear, fostering important conversations, and promoting understanding. And so Isaac is here to speak on the impact that systemic racism and ingrained prejudices contribute to a complex landscape where unrequited love becomes a shared experience and, frankly, the status quo. So, without further ado, here is Isaac.
I'm Isaac. My pronouns are they, them. I am a musician, writer, podcast host. I dabble in many creative things. Ever since I was a little kid, I always loved music. I was always singing at the television, to Lion King, all the Disney stuff. And my parents had such a unique taste in music. So being around like sounds such as Seal, Sade, Willie Nelson, Celine Dion, Toni Braxton, all these different people had such unique voices. Their storytelling through music was so inspiring, even for me at such a young age. So it just transcended to me wanting to pursue music. And music is my everything, it is my being. I like to say it's kind of my focal point of my creativity. But as I continued to grow in music, I began songwriting, which then transcended to free writing. So it's kind of crazy how my creativity kind of is a ripple effect. It kind of goes and sprouts and into different avenues and stuff like that. And now I'm super excited to start podcasting. I was inspired actually by sibling rivalry in Queer Town Hall to start a podcast about Black queerness. I haven't heard a lot of podcasts out there that really dabble into really tough discussions. Unrequited love, I mean, it's a feeling I'm sure a lot of people have experienced. It's having those romantic feelings for someone that just doesn't seem to want to give it back. I feel as though Black queer people often experience unrequited love more often and a little bit more intensely. I think there's a lot of parallels with colorism and unrequited love. Feeling ugly because you may look darker, feeling that you don't uphold the beauty standards that are set, which is based all around Eurocentrism. I mean, I live in Europe right now, and I just see and feel what it means to be Black in a more different way than being Black in America, because I'm kind of more faced with Eurocentrism, the idea of beauty and those standards. So when I moved to Europe, I felt more desired because I was in some way a forbidden fruit, right? People have never been with a Black person before, and a Black queer person. So I was seen as such this exotic entity. And I guess for me, if I'm honest, it felt almost like a blessing and a curse. I was getting the attention that I kind of always wanted, that I wasn't getting back in the States. But the microaggressions come a little bit more forward than I think in the States I encountered. And more racist tendencies are a little bit more upfront and in your face, other than in the US, where you can sometimes see and feel racism kind of rooted and embedded in the soil in which we live and breathe and walk in. So in Europe, I do find that I find myself being combated with racism and this idea of objectification towards Black queer experiences a little bit more in Europe than in the States. Internalized homophobia and anti-Blackness usually happens when we don't feel loved, right? So we begin to communicate and talk to ourselves in ways that fuel that negativity rather than dilutes it. So experiencing unrequited love for me led me to feel unworthy, believing that my Black queerness was undesirable or unlovable. I'll just put it out there. We have to talk about white cis gay males, okay, real quickly. because being in a predominantly white gay environment can be very, very toxic. I grew up in a predominantly white area of the Bay Area. So I was the only Black kid in many of my classes. And having my not only Black experience, but Black queer experience in a predominantly white environment was very, very hard. And even moving in Europe, I mean, Germany is all white people. We're majority white people. So I guess that being that growing up in an all white environment for a good portion of my life kind of set me to feel prepared to be in a lot of white spaces. But I can't ignore the toxicity that happens when Black queer people are in predominantly white cis male environments. And that's not, that is feelings of not feeling attractive because I wasn't getting attention that I wanted in those spaces. It can feel at times that, in the white gay culture, they have it so much easier when it comes to finding love and getting romantic attention. Through those negative experiences of not feeling good enough, not hot enough, not sexy enough, I started to really put myself down and talk to myself in such a negative way. In middle school, where adolescence and puberty is at its height, I was really discovering my queerness at a very young age. And I remember experiencing, love for another man or another, person in middle school. And they were the popular kid. All the girls loved him. He was like a Justin Bieber kind of guy. And he was just inquired just to, because his mom signed him up or something like that, some shit like that. And I was a singer, so I really was good at singing. So I got attention for that. And I think that he just like really liked the confidence or something like that. And yeah, he would just start coming to my house all the time, and and like that's how it went. And it was kind of like a secret. Like no one knew that we were kind of fooling around, and had this kind of connection because we kept it very private, very secret. Um, but if I wanted love like the movies. I wanted what I saw in High School Musical. I wanted those feelings of being wanted and being desired. And I think that kind of tinted my further interactions as I grew up more, is because, and a lot of Black queer people experience it, feeling hidden and feeling not wanted openly and unconditionally kind of sets that tone for how you perceive love and how you view love and experience love in the future. The way we talk to ourselves is very, very important. It's important that we constantly remind ourselves of our self-worth, and that when negativity creeps in, we need to talk to it in a healthy way. So instead of talking to your internal fears and negativity kind of monstrous or monster like, or approaching it in a very scary manner, I learned through Unrequited Love to talk to my fears and my anxiety as if I'm talking to a friend or a loved one. So when that anxiety creeps in of not really feeling good enough, not cute enough, not worthy enough, I stop and I say, okay, my anxiety friend needs a glass of water, or my anxiety friend needs to take a walk, or my anxiety friend just needs to breathe, or my anxiety friend needs to watch a funny movie, make something out of feeling that negativity and turning it into positivity. And through that trauma that I have experienced with Unrequited Love in the past, I believed that I had to give myself more credit and build a better relationship within myself. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like I realized things that I liked and what I didn't like. So when I was starting to date, I knew, oh, we're not doing that. Or the minute something I saw that brought me back to a negative space with encountering unrequited love, I just stopped it. I do not want to put myself in positions that make me uncomfortable, make me feel less than, and I just abort mission. And as I continuously did that over time, I was able to finally find someone that truly respects me and loves me for exactly who I am and how I am. And, of course, in relationships, you have many difficulties. Not everything is like flowers and, all beautiful stuff. You have some down days, but I am so proud of myself that I allowed myself through my trauma to know what I wanted and know what I needed. And I found someone really well. So I do think that even if it does feel really bad and you're continuously feeling this unrequited love and these experiences where you feel that love isn't the best and you're not getting love back, start taking mental note and start to really say, hey, what is my value? What is my worth? Is this serving me anything? If not, go away. And that's kind of the mentality that I felt like I had to build over time. I mean, the truth is that love can be extremely dangerous for Black queer individuals. So fear of violence and backlash of simply showing or conveying love for one another is unfortunately a real reality for us. So fear for not being accepted can cause people to feel very isolated, to create this toxic idea of what love is. And we know the phenomenon of down low relationships. So not only in interracial relationships, but also in Black love, hiding that love is something that's very prominent for us. And I think people don't understand that being down low and being in those relationships in itself creates such a torture chamber of emotions and anxiety. And I think this is one of the big reasons I feel why we see so much violence towards the Black queer community, and people viewing us as caricatures of human beings or animated versions of human beings. I think we can all believe and say that, microaggressions and people coming to us and approaching us in ways that are absolutely ridiculous. They don't view us as real people. They don't view us as having the same emotions as them. I mean, it goes hand in hand with representation, representation in media. If we don't see ourselves, then how do we know that we can obtain it? The lack of representation just fuels the feeling of isolation and loneliness for Black queer people. And, that's the thing. That's the annoying part, is that Black queer people have to always kind of taint or twist their vision of media to make it connect to them, because there is not a lot out there for us to connect to. And even sometimes when we do see ourselves, when we do see representation, it's not 100% accurate, or it's kind of not raw enough, not real enough. I'm missing the modern. Where's the modern take? A lot of the times where we see representation of Black queerness, it's always in the past. And it's always kept in the past. So when you start to have those conversations in the future and surrounding representation and in media, if you don't see yourself, you think that you're just in the past, that it's not relevant today. And that's where I get very critical, right? Is when I do digest media that I see a reflection of myself, I'm very cautious, because I'm saying, okay, is this just for a moment? Because it tends to be that Black queerness is momentary. There is diversity within Black queerness as well. So, it's in that sense, right? If they're seeing, what they see on RuPaul's Drag Race or Pose, or they're seeing in the media just a certain kind, walking up to me in a club being like, oh, yes, mama, period. Oh, all the white gays love to come to me and be like, oh, yes, mama, oh, period. And I'm like, why do you think I talk like that? Why do you think I exude that? And it's so crazy, because they'll do that and then turn around and they're just like back to normal, like nothing, like they're just talking normal. And it's like, so you view me as a caricature of a human being. You don't take me seriously. So when it comes to love, if that's all you are open to and all you see, you don't view me as someone that deserves it and wants it.
I mean, I think unrequited love, if we can call it that. I mean, it is. I guess this is kind of love, because one person is feeling something. Is really easy to come by. Like, it's like on every street corner, essentially. It can be, and it.
Yeah, I mean, unrequited could be with anyone. You don't, like, if you just attach yourself to a person, then if they don't feel back, it'll get, you'll land yourself in these unrequited streets. It's unrequited love projecting. I think it's expecting is what it is. I think what it is you're expecting something because you have your own feelings, and then you put those out there, but you're putting it out there because you want something back, which is by the way understandable and normal. But when you don't get that back,
but you know what? It's one thing if you're like, have a crush on a secret crush on somebody that you never talk to, like, your teacher or somebody that you like are around, but you never express these feelings to. But I do think that, like, after a while, getting, having a sort of relationship, sexual or romantic or emotional, with somebody, but there's still no love coming from that person, then it can feel abusive. You know what I mean? That's different from like, oh, I have a crush on them, I wonder what they're like. If you're having a sexual encounter like with Isaac, where you are having all these feelings, especially in middle school, then it kind of feels like abuse that person's like leading you on. What are you supposed to do?
Well, and I think then you're left with the question, like, is it that person's, like, if also these are like, a lot of us have these interactions in
I'm
middle
still
school,
having them, damn it,
and none of us are, and obviously when you're in middle school, you're not emotionally equipped to deal with these things. but we're still having these situations because we're just all pumped full of
No.
hormones.
I disagree because I know that I was emotionally equipped to deal with these things. So I was dealing with them in middle school. The other people are the ones who aren't emotionally equipped to deal with. Okay.
You're the only
Yes, I'm
one.
the only
You're the
one,
only one in the whole
darling.
world who's emotionally.
Don't you see me? No, I think that, okay, if I'm not emotionally equipped to deal with the unrequited love of it all, then they're not emotionally equipped with the reality of just being in a relationship and open and out with me because of my queerness, which was never something that it was not hideable. Like it was there. Everybody knew, you know.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. I think that in terms of unrequited love, it often comes with a feeling of loneliness, and I think it's time to have the upsetting conversation about loneliness, or at least listen to someone talk about it with us. And I know feeling lonely is just
It's
no one
different than
wants to
being
feel
alone,
lonely.
though.
We're gonna have say again, it is different because you can feel lonely and surrounded by people, and you can be by yourself and you
Yeah,
cannot feel lonely at all. Loneliness is not a state of who's around you. It's
yeah,
really about how you
yeah.
feel in relation to people. You know what I mean? And I want to invite Laurnie Wilson to our podcast to talk about loneliness. Laurnie, she's a multidisciplinary hypnotherapist, yoga teacher, and an intuitive guide who works primarily with women, BIPOC, and queer folks. And she has navigated loneliness often and throughout various aspects of her life. So, Laurnie, please take it away
Alone.
by yourself.
My name is Laurnie Wilson. I am a multidisciplinary hypnotherapist. So, hypnotherapy is the basis of my work, but I also weave in things like journaling. I weave in things like kind of mind body connection, somatics, yoga, all of that into the work that I do with helping folks to really get what they want. And it sounds super basic, but you'd be kind of surprised how often we don't know what we want or we're afraid of what we want. And so I help folks get over that hurdle and actually get there. So, if you're totally new to hypnotherapy or this is the first time you've ever heard of it, it is a modality that works with rewiring your subconscious. So, essentially, what we're doing is understanding what's been going on below the surface. We walk around every day consciously thinking, but beneath that is your subconscious thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, patterns. Those are all things that are playing and impacting your actions, your thoughts, your behaviors. So, what hypnotherapy does is it allows you to get relaxed. It allows you to go beyond the conscious mind chatter and get a real look at what's there, kind of like your internal wiring. And then you get to choose, do you like that or do you want to shift it around a little bit? I love to work with women, BIPOC, and queer folks. I think hypnotherapy traditionally is very white, very older male, very cisgendered, all the things that might be a little bit triggering to folks who may have had traumatic experiences with that demographic. And there really just aren't a lot of Black queer hypnotherapists out there. So I really seek to be someone that folks can come to who they feel comfortable with off the bat. Maybe we already have some shared experiences. And there's just such a need, I think, for representation in this field. Loneliness is a really interesting topic and a really interesting concept because I do think that it lives many places. I think that it does live in our beliefs about ourselves and our beliefs about our lives. So, in that way, I do think that it is housed somewhere in the subconscious. But then I also think we can be given kind of conscious confirmations of what our beliefs already are. So, for example, maybe you already believe that you are someone who is like very lonely much of the time or is like kind of always comes back to a state of loneliness. And so as you move through your day, you are seeing confirmation of that. You're seeing, oh, yep, this person canceled on the plans, or oh, yep, this person wasn't there for me when I needed them. So constantly you're kind of reaffirming that for yourself. Loneliness is really real. But I do think our subconscious beliefs about it can allow us to navigate that experience with either more ease or more difficulty. My experience with loneliness is interesting because there definitely have been moments in my life where I did feel lonely. I don't feel that way now. And I think it's because I have been able to understand what it means for me to be alone, but not to be lonely. So, for example, for some context, I grew up as an only child. I do have a sister now, but I only met her as an adult. So grew up as an only child, divorced parents. So there was a lot of time that I was spending on my own, had a lot of friends, but still there was that element of like being an only child. I've lived primarily on my own as an adult, including during the pandemic, which is truly a wild experience. Loneliness, yeah, that came up a lot. Um, and also, I haven't had a lot of long term romantic relationships. And so, all of these are things that you might look at and say, wow, like she must be lonely. And I'll be honest, I think in my early 20s, like maybe even in college, those were times when being alone really did feel lonely. But I think it was also the first time that I had vocabulary around what loneliness was and also had the awareness of what it felt like to be by myself. And I think when you're so used to, in some ways, I think when you don't have vocabulary, like I didn't start going to therapy until I was in college. So I didn't have the vocabulary around it. I didn't know what it meant for me to want to be around people or not want to be around people. And so I think at that time there was sort of a learning curve, right? Of understanding, oh, when I'm alone, I feel this way. Or when I'm with people, I feel this way. Or, what does that look like on a day to day basis? And I feel very fortunate because although some of those years were more challenging and like living alone right out of college, all my friends left the city that we had gone to college in. I stayed, like, it was challenging, right? Like they say, living alone, you really see yourself because every wall in your house is a mirror. And I think in those times, I definitely struggled at first and started to get curious like, well, why? Why is it actually a struggle? Or what are the beliefs that I have about myself? Not having social plans this weekend or not having people that I can just call up to like come over if I need something immediately. And that also, I mean, looking back, I'm like, I think that started my journey with understanding my subconscious. I don't think I knew it at the time. But over the many years that have followed, I've started to understand like, okay, there are real periods of loneliness that maybe do come from not building my schedule in a way that allows me to like go and see people that I love or allows me to travel, like do things that I enjoy. And then there are times that I'm alone and that can be so peaceful. And so I think it's really this journey that I've been on that I also think is like an individual one where you find kind of your capacity for aloneness. And I think I have quite a high capacity for it. There have been several beliefs that I think I've shifted over the years around loneliness and being alone. I think one of the biggest ones was tied to romantic relationships and thinking, well, no one will ever choose me, or, no one is ever going to want to be with me, or something like that. And I think a lot of that honestly came from very kind of like a very traditional view of relationships growing up, which I didn't have any queer influences growing up. I came from a town that was like still is quite a bit conservative and just didn't have like external role models. And so I think in that time, feeling like no one was going to choose me was really based off of what I thought should be happening or the timeline I thought I should be on, when I didn't realize actually there's so many other paths that you can take. Just because you're not in a romantic relationship right now doesn't mean that you're like flawed, doesn't mean that there's a problem with you, doesn't mean that you can't be in a romantic relationship at some point. It was very kind of black and white. And so that was a very longstanding one that I feel pretty confidently now is no longer an issue. And I think that what helped me there was getting out of a place of almost like passivity of needing to be chosen and switching that narrative and saying, oh, actually, I get to choose. I am the one who gets to invite someone into my life. I am the one who gets to decide if this is a time for me to date or not to date. I'm the one who gets to like see the red flags and decide to walk in the other direction now, And that was just a whole mindset shift that happened. Honestly, there are so many things that I think I could only have learned about myself in solitude. And okay, I'll say that with a caveat. I do think sometimes we do need relationship in order to bring out certain things, in order to let us kind of integrate the lessons. But I think for me, one of the things I've learned is that I actually work best with solitude. Like I don't think I could have learned that with other people around. But seeing the way that my day is different when I start prioritizing myself, when I start prioritizing with like that quiet morning time, absolutely have learned that. I think I've also learned, maybe this is very basic, but I've also learned like who I am and what I like. And I think that's been really important to shut off any sort of comparison or distractions, because Lord knows there is so much of that. And it is so easy to open up whatever app and start to question what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing, or maybe you should be buying this or wearing that or whatever. And I think for me, being able to set firmer boundaries around what I'm taking in that way and really having like mental solitude has allowed me to tap deeper into, okay, this is what I actually like, or this is what I actually need, or this is what actually feels good to me. I really love the question of like, have you ever felt lonely within community? Yes. The answer is definitely yes. I taught at a yoga studio in Pittsburgh for several years, and I was around other people. I was around other teachers. I'm speaking specifically of like the relationship between the teachers in this case. I could be around them. I could be at functions with them, but I always felt incredibly alone and incredibly disconnected. It's so important to be able to be seen. And I think obviously people, okay, I operate under the belief that everyone is always doing their best, because I think if I didn't have that belief, I would be a lot more cynical about the world. But people might be trying, and maybe in this particular community, maybe people were trying to form community, but because of the, identifiers that they had and just the bodies that they lived in and the ways they moved through the world, it was never necessarily going to be easy or comfortable for them to see me in the way that I would want and need to be seen in order to feel truly accepted. There was a client that I had maybe a year and a half ago who really wanted to have more connection, and they really wanted to have more community, wanted more friendship, wanted more romantic relationship, all of that. And I think some of the main issues that we looked at or beliefs that we looked at were these kind of feelings of needing to prove one's worth in order to be in community or be accepted, and also confidence. Because I think with this particular case, there was a certain level of social anxiety that was going along with either creating the feeling of aloneness or, not going out to the events that maybe they were invited to, things like that. And so what we were able to do is really expand that client's bandwidth for being uncomfortable with putting themselves out there, with being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, which meant, yeah, maybe they were going to be nervous about accepting that invite, or maybe they were going to feel like they needed to second guess themselves after the event, but really expanding the capacity to go into those situations. And then also decreasing the narrative of needing to overanalyze, of needing to judge, of needing to create more stories after the situation was done. By the end of our time together, that client was able to no longer feel like there was this sort of burden of not enoughness, and instead was able to navigate kind of the ups and downs that came with the social anxiety or that came with connecting with new friends with a lot more grace and a lot more ease. So what a session will look like is that you will come in and we will spend maybe 5-10 minutes talking about what it is that seems to be the issue right now in your life. What's the obstacle? What's the problem, for lack of a better word? And then from there, we'll identify, okay, well, if that's where we are now, where do you want to be? What's ideal for you? And the reason I'm going to have you talk about this is because if you're talking about it consciously, it's cueing your subconscious mind to already be thinking about this. It's already kind of planting those seeds there. So once we've identified where you are and where you want to go, then I lead you through a progressive relaxation. So if you've ever done like a yoga nidra or any sort of like mindfulness, really, where we're relaxing from the top of your head down to your feet, it's going to feel very similar to that. That allows your conscious mind to go to the back burner and your subconscious to take center stage. And once you're deeply relaxed, then I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm going to be inviting you to imagine something or, describe something to me. And depending on what is kind of called for, I'll use a series of, or an option of different kind of techniques. So maybe there will be some inner child healing. Maybe there will be, for example, if we're talking about that past client, I'm almost guaranteed that at one point in that client sessions, we brought out the part of that client that was afraid. And we worked with that fearful part. And we asked it, okay, well, what's going on? Like, what do you need? What are you trying to do? Because all of these parts of self, which we talk about in hypnotherapy, they're always trying to help us, but they might just be operating off of old beliefs or old systems of safety and things like that. So we'll always ask that part, okay, what do you need? And how can I help you? And then I'll have that client, give that part of themselves what they need. There's often a process of release. So maybe we'll box up all the old beliefs and imagine that you can like destroy that box. Maybe if it is something that came from a parent or a caregiver, we're able to kind of like cut the tie and give those things back to that parent or that caregiver. Honestly, the sky's the limit about what's possible. It's a very it is a very intuitive process for me because every single person's so different. But by the end of this, you will have acknowledged what was coming up, shifted whatever was in the way, and then we really amplify how you want to feel. So we bring in the good feelings. We do something called future pacing, which is where I invite you to imagine yourself moving forward with these new feelings, these new beliefs, like what's your day like? What are you wearing? Like all of those good things. Make it super real on a subconscious level. And then once that feels good, I will invite you, to rise back up, come into this time and this place. And that's a wrap. Sometimes we'll debrief a little bit, but otherwise that's what a session looks like. So earlier we were talking about not feeling seen in groups where people do not share the same identifiers versus being seen in groups where people do share more of the same identifiers. And look, for each of us, maybe that ratio is going to be different, right? Maybe the set of identifiers that are important to us is going to vary depending on our experiences and what we're looking for. But I think one of the things I wish I had understood earlier was that it is not worth it for me. It is not actually even helpful or healthy for me to try and be seen by a group of people who cannot see me. Because you will never win. And it's making me emotional. Because I think we spend a lot of our time trying to be seen and trying to force other people to see us. And it's not our job, nor is it actually possible for us to force or create some sort of like all-seeing ability from other people. And that's okay, actually, if others can't see us. It's their loss, honestly. But the sooner that you can realize the group that you're in and the sooner you can realize what their capacity is, the better off you will be, because you will just be spinning your wheels otherwise. And I do my best not to live with regrets, but I do wish that a younger version of myself could have seen that sooner and said, you know what, Laurnie, let's just cut our losses. It doesn't matter how cool you think these people are. It doesn't matter how smart you think these people are or whatever. And that's what I want to say to anyone who's listening is it doesn't matter what pedestal you've put this group of people on. If they can't see you, they are not deserving of that pedestal. So understand that and be really honest with yourself. And it might be very painful. It was so painful for me and honestly took years for me to forgive myself for putting people on a pedestal and thinking that they needed to see me in order for me to be worthy or something like that. It took me years to forgive myself for that. And maybe your mileage may vary. Maybe it won't take you years. But you know what? It can be a lot of time and a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, honestly, to be in those situations. So the best thing that I can say is be really honest with yourself. Be really real about the people that you are surrounding yourself with and what their capacity is. They might still be nice people, right? Like they don't have to be evil people. They just might not be able to see you and you might not get what you want out of that experience. And I promise there are people out there who can see you. The world is so big and diverse and beautiful. And maybe it will look different than you thought. Maybe it will come from a group of people that you didn't even realize was like ready to welcome you. But you can't make space for that if you're like white knuckling onto some kind of acceptance that just isn't going to come. So first, acknowledge that. And then allow yourself to be seen by the people who are going to be able to receive you. Like, I think sometimes you can get very burned in a situation and think, okay, well, I'm never going to be able to be accepted. I'm never going to be able to show myself. Those are subconscious beliefs that we can get rid of, by the way. But I don't want you to do that. Don't even want you to write those stories for yourself. Instead, if you acknowledge like, okay, this group really isn't for me. They don't have the capacity. It is truly their loss. I will move on. We will cut our losses. Then you can say, okay, well, what would it be like to actually be seen? And what does that feel like? Because then it's not even something you have to think about. It's something you can feel. You can feel when you're around people who have those identifiers, who have those commonalities that allow you to feel seen. And it's not like a logic thing. It becomes a felt experience. And that I think is much more powerful than trying to rationalize or logic your way into acceptance. When you feel it in your body, like maybe it's in your heart, maybe it's in your stomach, maybe it's somewhere else. When you feel it, you know, ooh, this is my place. This is my community. And look, it might take longer than we want sometimes, right? Like I think all of us have probably had an experience of thinking, where is my community? Where are they? Like, why are they not here now? And that's so frustrating. And like, honestly, sometimes the timing just doesn't work the way we want it to. And as long as you don't give up on the fact that you, first of all, are worthy of being seen, it can be easy for someone to see you, for many people to see you, and you tap into what it would actually feel like in your body to be seen, then you're going to have a much easier time finding those like-minded people, finding those aligned, you know, finding those aligned like identities and those aligned demographics that are going to like land in your body.
I have these moments where I feel really lonely. And I think it's because of the work that I do and um, spending so much time away from people. Or I spend like a month at a time with all these people that I just met. And then they all go back to their various corners of the earth, truly. You know what I mean? You meet a designer from France, and then a so and so from this place, and then a so and so from Tennessee, and then a so and so. Then you get together to do your thing, and then you've done the thing. And I mean, you probably felt. Did you feel that like any of that when you were doing these big theater
Yeah, I
shows?
mean I think that's probably the life of an artist, right? Like we at least in modern times as an artist who does conventional entertainment, these are all different projects. Like we don't have a job, we have a career that engages with like different projects. And so like you get together, you gather, you and these as an entertainer, the subject matter is often really deep, really moving, very personal because it's about like human experience in some way, shape, or form. And so it really means you have to get together. You have a very limited amount of time because of schedules, because of money, because of whatever the situation is, and because of the pressure of having to get ready to produce something or like have it be ready. So you have like a couple of weeks or a couple of months to put it all together. You're really, really like emotionally connected. You're spending more time than people would normally spend at like a day job. Like it's not like you're clocking in and out all the time. And so
Mm-hmm.
like you kind of eat, sleep, and breathe this experience. And then for a lot of artists, especially people involved in film and television, definitely more for theater though, you spend a lot of your off time with those people as well. So like you're spending 8 hours a day in rehearsal or doing show, whatever. And then you're like, well, nothing to do. Let's go have dinner and go get drinks together. And then
Because they're the only people on
exactly.
your schedule. They
Yeah.
have the
So
same
you spend
schedule as
so
you.
much time with these people and then they all just leave. And it's tough because even, on the last big theater thing that I did, we were all traveling. So like we all didn't live where we were doing the show. And, our show was at like 9 or 8 o'clock, whatever. And then it was over at 11 and we had to be out of our apartments by 9 a.m. the next day. Like to leave. So like we had no time unless you could pack up 4 months of your life into your
Yeah.
suitcase in 1 hour, it would be impossible. And so I was like, feels like very much like give us all of you and that bye, I'm done with you. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. I see that. I see that. But we have each
Yes.
other.
And we always have Zoom. Well, it's time for our next guest, who is a self proclaimed tech nerd, a writer, a critical thinker, a liberationist, and currently resides in Atlanta, Georgia. Let's hear it for Jenks.
Hi, my name is Jenks. I am a writer. I'm an abolitionist, critical thinker, liberationist, and I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia. A liberationist is someone who fights for the liberation of all people. I prioritize the queer community, Black and Brown, and Indigenous communities. But when I think of liberation, it's really just liberation for all from apartheid, from police brutality, from capitalism, etc. So liberation here in Atlanta, it's interesting. So I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years, and so I just moved here in the summer. And if you're not familiar with Cop City is being built just on the outskirts of the city. A lot of taxpayer dollars are going into this structure that is essentially a compound for police all over the world, not just the United States, but internationally as well, to train police to continue policing and murdering us. And interestingly enough, with everything that's going on in Gaza with Palestinians, the IOF soldiers and police there actually work directly with the Atlanta PD. So there's a lot of cross training happening. They actually fly to Israel. Atlanta PD flies to Israel to train over there and vice versa. And so there's been a number of ongoing protests to prevent Cop City from being built. Um, a lot of other liberationists and protesters have actually been killed quite unjustly by the police for protesting, for peacefully protesting. And so um, while I'm still becoming familiar with the city because I've only been here a few months, a lot of what I've done on the ground is just sharing information on social media and getting people to understand that while it seems very localized, everything that's happening to Palestinians, everything that's happening here in Atlanta is something we should all be considering on a global scale, because even though it might not be in your backyard yet, it's absolutely going to be. And so I just try to raise awareness around the happenings of that. When it comes to unrequited love, I feel like this has been a lot of my existence, honestly, for two reasons. So one, I'm demisexual. With if you're unfamiliar with demisexuality, it really means that I don't really have sex with someone unless there's a pretty strong emotional connection or trust established with that person. I mean, sure, I can like have random hookups here and there, but it's really rare. I prefer to like really know the person, which is why I often fall in love or fall in lust with like platonic quote unquote friends. And secondly, and I preface this to say I re-listened to the interracial dating episode last night just to kind of refresh my memory on that. And while this doesn't need to be a full-on sequel to that conversations, like interracial dating, fracking, we can leave those conversations for another time. But I would be remiss to not emphasize that like race and class and beauty standards, et cetera, they're all generally prerequisites to wanting or desiring someone else who is emotionally unavailable. Um, and alongside that, it's, I think oftentimes when you are repeatedly putting effort into somebody who is emotionally unavailable, it's oftentimes like an insecure attachment style. So when it comes to who I tend to like fall for, one component for me is that I'll meet someone, we become friends, it's platonic, one way or the other. And then as the trust builds, I start to, whether it's fall in love or fantasize, I don't quite know. I think I start to develop some type of feeling out that is beyond, I don't say beyond friendship, but like sexual or otherwise. So I think that's one component of it. And then I think the other is, I think oftentimes for me, they've been men who, or non binary folks who are like either already in a relationship, which happens quite often, or as I was growing up, maybe like late teens, early 20s, straight men. I grew up in Indiana, Section 8 housing project. Most of my peers were Black or biracial. A lot of us were children of single mothers. And I was lucky enough to be within a school district that essentially was very affluent, very white, very like middle to upper class white people, but also farmers and stuff. And the reason why the district kind of had a diversity, I don't know what you'd call it, like a diversity, equity, and inclusion component of it, where basically my small apartment complex was a part of the district. And so my high school, for example, had roughly, I'll say between 2,000 and 2,500 students. And I think there were maybe 30 Black kids. And I think I'm being generous. And maybe two maybe were openly gay. if you can imagine that. And so when I was a kid, a lot of the experimenting I was doing sexually was with Black men, Black and biracial men. And most of them were like hood niggas, like the same ones who, we'd hook up in the stairwell of our apartment building, and then in public they would call me a faggot, right? And so on top of that, I had a mother who was a narcissist, still a narcissist, um, religious. She had her own traumas when it came to my father, a Black man who abused her and all these other things. So when you kind of combine like her trauma with the trauma of like, I think this was around the time when I started to seek out validation at any place that I possibly could, because, well, like my Black homies were starting to push me away because as I got older, the gayness started coming out. My own mother was seeing that her son was also gay, and she went through my room one day when I was like 12 or 13. She took my like Missy Elliott CDs, Ludacris, like 3LW, all the shit that I had bought myself while I was away. She put it in a garbage bag and threw it in the trash. And I came home one day and my room was like bare. And I was like, and her friend was over, like her church friend. And I literally was like, what the fuck did you guys just do? Like, who do you think you are coming to my mom's house? Like, throwing away the livelihood of a child and all this stuff. And so I think it goes back to my original point where it's like, this was a kind of a key turning point where it's like, I think as a result of all of those traumas, as I got older, and even through years of therapy and all these other things, there's a level of unworthiness that I think people try to ignore when it comes to their type, quote unquote, their preferences, quote unquote, and their partners, that it's easier to just say like it is what it is than to identify that's like, no, I found comfort in those hood niggas that I was hooking up with who then rejected me. And like there's sort of a childlike innocence of like wanting to reach for that, I suppose, if that makes sense. When I was in college, there was a straight guy, really friendly with everyone. I never had any expectation that there could be anything romantic or intimate between us. He's just like this straight white dude. Like who's to know, right? And then we always followed each other on social media, even after college, and for years. So I'm thinking maybe 6 years. We just watch each other's stories, no contact, whatever. And then one day he replies to one of my Instagram stories where I'm probably shirtless, showing off the little oblique V section, right? Like sexy, whatever. And he replies and says, gosh, like gay guys have it so easy. And I'm like, I instantly knew. I'm like, oh, this nigga, what? Like something's going on. Like I know, like you don't just say that out of the blue, 6 years, no communication, but like let's see where this is going, right? And so I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I just feel like gay people just can be more comfortable in their skin and blah blah blah. I'm like, you could do it too. Just like take your fucking shirt off and like post it on your story. And he was like, no, man, like straight guys, we have to resort to Reddit. And I was like, do you have a Reddit page? Is that what you're telling me? You've got a Reddit? Like, are you showing off anon like body on Reddit? And he was like, wow, like, yeah, like I've never shown anyone before and blah, blah, blah. So that was the start of the conversation, right? Fast forward. So this was, when did this start? 2018. So from 2018 until maybe 2021, like maybe not daily. It started off daily, but weekly. We were like sending each other videos, photos, like masturbating together. And he's married to a woman. And this carried on for years. And it got to a point where, and I realized this after the fact, that I had spent so much more time and emotional energy fostering that than people who were openly queer and openly right in front of me, who like wanted me for the right reasons. And I don't want to say it's sad, because I mean it was fucking fun. Like I had a good time, obviously, and I think he did too. But it got to a point where I think he started to feel guilty, and he definitely pulled away. And we still kind of text now, but it's basically me, like I have to reach out to him, and we're not exchanging pictures or any of that anymore. It's just more so like, hey man, how's it going? Whatever, very surface level. But I think there's a part of me that knows it's fucked up on so many different levels, but not fucked up in the sense that, I know this sounds terrible, but it's like, if you're going to cheat on your significant other, like that has shit to do with you, right? Like it's it's fucked up of me to be the other person, and I think that I can acknowledge that and be self-aware enough of that. But I also think that like we're all human and we all desire different things, and I wish we were in a place where like he didn't feel like he needed to do that in order to get what he wanted out of himself or out of society or whatever. I say all of this to say that it was 3 years of, thrilling interaction. And when I think back to like my dating history and my history with actual queer people who want me for who I am, like, I don't think I've ever given another person the same amount of energy as I gave to him. So to preface, this essay was written for someone who was a good friend for a while. And when I was moving from one city to another, I like met them and stayed with them. And ever since we've remained friends, but never romantic in any sense. So that's where the context comes from here. All right. Dear Mateo, after 8 years of friendship infused with anonymity, edging auras, physical closeness, and emotional intimacy, I want to unearth what feels unsaid. You, a Scorpio, and I, a Cancer, love a good fantasy, but you and I are tangible, and we owe each other reality. After driving across the country, moving from Chicago to LA with hopes of becoming famous, I arrived to your apartment after a 14-hour drive. I had 2,000 miles of unknown legacy to go, yet I was more nervous about meeting you than I was about the manic, life-altering relocation upon which I embarked. I sat outside in the car for 15 minutes collecting myself before walking up to your apartment complex. I remember you not meeting me in the courtyard or at the gate. Rather, you buzzed me in and hollered from your doorway, your deep voice echoing through the complex like an angel guiding me to serenity. I climbed up the stairs, and there you were, adorned in loose-fitting sweatpants and a t-shirt. Nice to finally meet you, said the friendly, innocent face who I immediately gathered could ask anyone for whatever he wanted and get it. I was in love, like lust. That night, while you were in the bathroom with the shower running, your straight roommate and I started talking about dating, and at one point he said, Mateo only brings home white men. Ah, by now, at age 28, I had trained myself to not be surprised when another queer person of color fetishized whiteness or muscly white bodies over their ancestrally chosen counterparts. I remember wondering if you could hear us talking about you. Getting to know your dynamic over the years, it was clear you and your roommate loved to antagonize each other. I think I was hoping you were listening to our conversation and would interject to his accusation against you, citing legal briefs and precedents to debunk these claims referencing your whites-only gaze. But you never did. Somewhat manically, I decided to play Carmen Sandiego and take a nosedive into your Instagram profile. Not only did I scroll through most of your follower list to uncover your preferences or type, I screenshot half a dozen examples of you commenting heart eye and sweating emojis on Colby Keller-looking men's pictures with usernames like Beefy Boy or Cage Creamsicle. I saved the pictures to a folder called Mateo's Type. I know, I'm fucking insane. I needed to justify my own insecurities with evidence that I should remain silent and platonic, never confessing my very fresh feelings for you in order to avoid rejection from someone I actually respect. Over those 3 nights and 2 days, we slept in your bed next to each other in our underwear. Every morning, once we were both awake and out of bed, you'd make and fold tidily the heavy beige blanket we used, unaware of my throbbing erection hidden underneath night after night. I've lived in my head in this way as long as I can remember, convinced the people I want won't want me. It's okay, it's fine. Over the next several years, we remained close friends, best friends, maybe, though I still don't know what justifies someone being the best of anything. In 2021, you started dating a white man with a porn star name who looked like all the men in the Mateo's Type folder I made. He actually reminded me of the white version of you. He was sweet, funny, and kind. Everything I was, he was just white. Night after night, as he pulled your legs apart, you pulled away from me. I thought adding you to my rarely used close friends list on Instagram would bring us closer together. Stupidly, my timing was terrible. I added you immediately after I posted a sexy photo, to which you replied, "Man, take me out of this, LOL." I took this as a more blatant rejection and again dove deeper into the lake of insecurities, despite me still having zero context into how you've ever felt or feel about me intimately. Maybe you didn't want to see me like that because it distracted from your feelings for your boyfriend, but my intuition rarely lies. It was my turn to pull away. 2 years later, of little to no contact between us, you and porn star broke up. While sitting warmly on a friend's couch 4 miles away from your apartment, I read your text message to me in which you explained how you were silently suffering and unable to meet with me while I was in town as planned. I responded. I said, I hope you feel better soon, BB. I want to be supportive of your situation, but I can't say I'm not disappointed that we won't be meeting up in person anymore. I wanted to talk to you about some stuff, be there for you, catch up, even apologize for some of my misses. I came here 4 days early to spend time with you. I know you weren't expecting your situation, and I'm empathetic to that. I sometimes just feel like I'm fighting for a friendship you're apathetic about. I love you and don't want to lose you. I'm really good at pushing people away and not looking back, which I don't want with us. I think we both have a chance to be better about communication and expressing our feelings. I feel bad bringing this up now, but I didn't want this to weigh on me anymore. For now, I hope you heal up. If you want to talk, you know where I'm at. 9 months later, you responded. Change my number, smiley face. Texting you now, nonstop for 3 hours feels regular, manic, stimulating. As our engagement remained steadfast and the conversation surged, it's the longest I'd felt happy in recent memory. We both shared our recent workout and body journeys, and taking progress pictures came up. I wanted to see you, but was too nervous to ask. Instead, I joked about how I don't know what you look like shirtless because, quote, we've never been around each other in a pool or whatever. The way you clocked me, you replied, LMAO, that sentence was funny for some reason. Yeah, bitch, you got me. I get it. Then you sent me a photo. My heart raced, and again, my dick got hard under a veil of unspoken emotions. The 2 pictures were reminiscent of a profile picture on Grindr. 2 headless torsos, anonymous, showing physical progress, wanting only to be admired but not identified. The first was you around the time of our last conversation, thicker, a bit of a gut, but still a body I wanted to feel against mine. The second was you slimmed way down with more defined muscles. You weren't wearing underwear in this one, but the bottom of the picture was cropped just above where your dick was that I wanted to see. I was reminded of how much I wanted you. More concretely, though, although these were taken months apart, they represented and reminded me of a longer timeline upon which I'm sure many other white porn stars have had a glimpse or a taste of my best friend. By the time these words reach your eyes, I've already told you an abridged version of these sentiments. Best case scenario, between us will exist 1, established boundaries, and 2, an open channel of communication. You're likely holding a joint, relaxing after the gym, posting headless pictures 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on social media to a list of your close friends I cannot see. Maybe your new partner is next to you right now. If you and I are in a position where you could put this letter down right now, pick up the phone and call me, it's because you promised not to drift away, and I promised to be more communicative. If you can't call me, it's because one or both of us couldn't meet the other where we needed. Perhaps I'm laying next to you on the bed right now, or perhaps that was only ever possible in my mind.
Well, I am very grateful that Jenks shared that story with us. And I want to, give a big shout out to all of our guests. It is very vulnerable to get up here and talk about this, talk about yourself. And we all don't realize that like having to talk to a stranger about yourself, and our producers are really good at building connections and gaining trust from our guests. So big shout out to Corey and Charlene who are talking to all these people, and big shout out to all of our guests for
and
being
thank you,
open
Jenks,
like that.
for that piece. It's great to have poetry involved. For more, you should go to Jenks' social media and find. I'm just looking at their social media handle right now, but we'll post it so that you can follow our guests and see where their stories go.
Well, let's just say we'll put it on the screen, and you
Yeah.
all can go find Jenks on your own. I don't think we're going to say
But
Jenks's
I have a question for you. Do you think that
handle.
like it's when is too loved to love? When is too young to experience to know like to be in love?
I feel like we've never
I
said
know.
fag on
Like
this
we could totally
podcast.
say it. It's not a curse at all. It's not. We own the word. It's not a
We've never
curse.
said fag on this.
Do you think that it's when do you think it's too young to fall in love? Like do you think it's possible to fall in love, like romantic love at like any age?
I mean, I think as soon as you start having feelings, you can fall in
Emotions.
love. I mean, and what? Yeah, and yeah. Once you start having emotions, those kind of emotions, you can fall in love, and it's not for us to say whether or not those feelings are whether or not that love. You know what I mean?
I
I
do.
mean, some people obviously say clearly yes. Romeo and Juliet is a story that's probably a little too young for.
But that's what I
They were just
mean.
so young in that story. But when I was in middle
What,
school,
they
the
felt more
feelings felt
intense.
really real. Yeah.
Mm.
So when I was that young, it felt real. It didn't
It
feel
was
it felt
real.
as real, if not more intense, than it does right now. So who am I to say that you're not in love? You know what I mean?
Who are
Who am I?
you? Yeah.
As an adult, I am looking at it like, oh, little kids, and oh, look at it.
It's puppy
when I was
love
that
to
age, I
us.
was like, it is dire. This is why, like, this is the
I'm
most
not
important
gonna
thing
live.
in
But no,
life.
I mean, the problem, or not the problem is, but the thing that I think we fail to talk about, not you and I, but just in general, is that, like, nobody breaks that cycle. So, like, all of that, like, you know, eh, drama and emotion that we felt in middle school, I think we just carry it over. In the meantime, never really learning from most people, generally, like, healthy ways to express those feelings, to deal with a breakup or when the relationship
Yeah.
ends or whatever's going on. So we just end up, I think it just perpetuates. And now here we are, a 30 something year old dating us, also whoever. And then there's still toxicity. There's still, like, I think the love was probably more innocent and pure when we were in middle school, because now it's paired with sort of abusive, for some people, abusive habits and toxic sort of traits. I'm not saying that love is just toxic and abusive, but I'm saying that for a lot of people, especially for those whose relationships end, um, there's it's a lot of times a reason, and sometimes it's just like, oh, we agreed amicably, which is a certain amount of them. But, like, a lot of them, people are getting dumped and whatever, And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know what the point is. Don't get into a relationship.
But well, everything, yeah. I mean, everything doesn't have to serve a point. You know what I mean? So let's go on to our final story of the evening and our contributor, which, by the way, again, thanks to everyone who reached out to us online when we posted looking for you all. You all came out in droves and we appreciate it. And now I am excited to introduce you all to Problem Child. Problem Child speaks on feelings of isolation they feel as an asexual drag artist in New York City, frequenting sexualized places, but they feel like their blackness and asexuality are inherently linked to each other. And of course, that's what intersectionality is. You don't get to separate any part of yourself from any part of your experience. And Problem Child is Brooklyn's premier Fisher Price failure drag artist, drag host, and frequent liar. It seems to use the medium of drag to reconnect queer adults with the joy of childhood and the power of the inner child. So let's hear from Problem Child.
My name is Problem Child. I'm a drag artist. I'm based in Brooklyn, even though I live in Queens. I'm a bit of a liar on that front. And my drag is basically about, like, connecting queer audiences, queer adults, to, like, the joy of the inner child. My message about, like, why you need to think about your inner child, I feel like a lot of times as queer adults, especially, like, Black queer adults, just, like, we are forced to grow up a lot faster than, like, our straight counterparts due to, like, trauma, due to, like, state violence and oppression, and we have to, like, leave the wonder of childhood alone to deal with the reality of, like, it's hard out here. Like, we don't really have moments to, like, relax and enjoy the way that we used to as children. I feel like some of my best memories of being a kid are just kind of meandering. It's not really, like, feeling like I have to do something or I have to survive, which that feeling of survival is so linked to capitalism. Like, and that just becomes more real the less privileged you are. So I feel like the reason why introducing this concept into drag is so important to me is because it's like, you you have your own happiness. It's just in here, and you have to look for it. And it's a lot smaller than you think, and it's always been there for you. And I like to. It's like a sense of comfort I'm trying to offer, I suppose. It's two axes that, like, my loneliness kind of operates. Just being, like, a Black, gender non-conforming queer in life in general, and then in queer spaces as, like, a Black asexual. I feel, especially in, like, in drag spaces, especially, sometimes I feel like the weirdo in the weird crowd. I feel like my whole life I had a very Disney princess-esque understanding of romance where I'm like, it's very slow and you don't kiss and you don't have sex. It's scary. And you're married and you love each other. I never really experienced sexual attraction to people. Like I always thought it was funny when like we were, I got older and I was a teenager and people would talk about like sex and hooking up. And I'm just like, that's so silly. Like I thought it was just like a trick people were doing. I didn't think it was a real thing that people were interested in. And then after my like run of the mill of relationships where like I had partners who wanted to be sexual and I couldn't. I was like, this is just not me. And I felt broken for a long time. And I'm sure that's like a feeling a lot of asexual people deal with. And then it's like, am I not really queer? I can't operate on like such a big identity of queerness as reclaiming sexuality. And I can't do the sex part. Maybe I'm a flop. Like maybe I'm not really queer. And then as I got older, I was like, no, it's pretty like not cis heteronormative to be like that. Like you're pretty queer, I think. And I've only kind of recently stepped into accepting it in a sense, and I try to be more vocal about it. But I feel like I've always kind of known. Accepting asexuality as ace person is like my boundaries are very clear from like the beginning of my relationships. I remember I had some girl come up and she was flirting with me, and she also didn't know I wasn't drag, so that was a whole thing in general. And she was like, oh, and I'd love to dine you, like maybe like touch you. And I was just like, stop. You had me in the first half. I don't want to do the rest of that. And it completely like gagged her. Like she couldn't continue to flirt with me because she saw me sexually first before she saw me romantically. And that sucks. Like that's a sucky feeling. But as a person who accepts my asexuality, I have to focus on myself and what's going to make me happy and not performing sexuality because it's what's normative in these spaces. There's nothing funnier than like one of my closest drag friends, Valentine, being like, I'm doing a burlesque show where we're going to be sexy and I want you in it. I'm just like, I have terrible news for you. I have really, really bad news for you. So I have this problem a lot when I'm in like these spaces because it's like I never ever wanted to come across that I think being sexual is bad because that is right-wing rhetoric about queerness and just sexuality as a whole to control us. That's why sexuality is so freely expressed in queer spaces to free us in a sense from like that dogma. So it's not that I think that being sexual is bad, just don't bring it to my house, like um and it's hard because I remember the first time I hosted a show, I felt the pressure to be sexy because I was like, well, all the hosts I've ever watched and admired make jokes about sex and blowing people and kissing or whatever it is that they do. So I have to do that. And then I started to get unwanted advances and I was like, uh-oh. And it's like, I don't mean to be like, oh, I'm lying about being sexual, but it's like, if I don't mention this, am I not fitting in? Am I doing it wrong? Am I not operating in these spaces correctly if I don't bring up sexuality in a sense like this? So it's rough, but nowadays I just kind of think it's like a new level of being a bit of a queer freak. Not only am I pink, not only am I black, I also don't want to talk about blowing people because I just don't do that. I will laugh and hee haw along when you do it, but just don't expect it to come out of my mouth. I want to talk about shit like Playhouse Disney or something. I don't know. The first time I really remember being lonely, it was even before I started doing drag, but when I was the drag assistant. And I'd hang out in the back rooms. I make it sound like the horror thing, but like the backstage area. And they would talk about like boys and sex and grinder. But one day I was already othered because I'm AFAB, so they really didn't even want to talk to me. They didn't want to look at me sometimes. Because they were like, you're not a boy, and they would talk about these things I just could not relate to. And it's the same feeling I kind of got when I was a kid growing up, and you're always picked last for dodgeball. Nobody wants to work with you on group projects because something about you is just so inherently othered. And it sucks. It's not a good feeling, and it makes you want to run out of the room. But where are you gonna go after that? That's the thing about like these spaces being like loving spaces inherently. The problem is when you run out of that room, where are you gonna go? There are no other loving spaces. This might be the only place you could fit in. So I just remember like I just wouldn't talk. I wouldn't talk. I felt like I had to shut off my personality. I had to be withdrawn because I was like, if I even say like I don't feel this way or I don't relate to this, then I'm gonna be even further other than I already am. And it's a desire to be accepted versus it's like you want to be accepted, but to a limit because you know that they're not going to. I very clearly remember when I came up with the name Problem Child. I got the name from my therapist, who was like, "You fight with your family a lot. You're kind of like the problem child of your family, even though like you're not really a bad kid. Like you're just othered inherently by who you are." And I was like, a light bulb went off, and I was like, "Problem child. Like this is a character in itself, where it's like I have always been like the I don't know, like the one that's attracted to bright colors. My family likes beige. I'm the one that's very youthful. My family's very mature for like reasons of like racism and trauma and all that other stuff. And um I realized that there's power in this otherness. I have a completely different experience than my environment, but I know I'm not alone. There's no way I'm not alone. And I I don't know, it's like with the asexuality and linking it to problem child, it's like she's my inner child. She's not supposed to be having sex. She's like spiritually 9. Like, doesn't make any sense. And I once I was able to tap into those feelings of like always feeling like I just don't want to participate in this. I don't want to participate in sex. It's like not I was on to something about who I am now, even all the way back then when I was just like the kid on the playground. And there's something powerful to knowing who you are just like that, like inherently. Like I always known I was queer. I just didn't have the words for it back then. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And that's kind of like when Problem Child started to be born from like, I need to do something with these feelings. There's no way I'm alone. I don't want to be like, loneliness is a power because it's not, because it's not fun. Solitude, however, when you're able to like look within and not have other voices interfering with your understanding of events and yourself, that is powerful because that's confidence. That's like the breeding ground for confidence is being able to be like, I trust how I feel about this and what I have to say about this. And I've talked to the board up here. I don't need any more outside confirmation. I've got it all on lock. I like to think that who I am out of drag is kind of like the manager of Problem Child. We're two different people. I'm on stage, I'm doing like Looney Tunes mixes and stuff, but then like once I'm out of drag, I have a buzz cut. I'm wearing my overalls and like my sneakers, like but I definitely feel like Problem Child, if I did not do this, I would not be someone who is confidently different. I think I would always feel that sense of like shame in my otherness, where I'd be like, I want to participate in being different, but I'm scared. I feel like that's a feeling a lot of people have when they start to come into themselves, where it's like, I'm different, but I am terrified to express that differentness. Through Problem Child, I feel like I'll go to work and I will have orange hair because I like orange and I always have. And I know that's different in like my neighborhood, but that's me, take it or leave it. And that's how I feel about asexuality, is how I feel about my loneliness, all of that. It's just like take it or leave it. I think I've always been like a avid toy collector. So when I was lonely, I always had like a plushie by my side. I always had like a especially like also like anything cartoon related. I was always like watching cartoons, and I always loved that they were kind of alone because they always had these big exaggerated emotions, these big exaggerated colors that made them literally pop off a page, that made them stand out from like the background characters. And they were embracing that like when you think about it, Daffy Duck is a quite despicable, awful individual, but you love him because he's not Elmer Fudd. He's not he is his own self-involved guy. Same thing with Bugs, same thing with like any like cartoon characters. Like, yeah, they're a bit much, but you love them because you're kind of a bit much too when no one's not looking. You're kind of a bit much too. And I always felt inspired by that, where I was like, yeah, I could take this isolation and these alone feelings and like warp it to be a more background esque character where I could just kind of mesh in with the others, but that's just not me. I'm alone because I'm different. And it was pretty much like, pick being different or pick being with other people. And I was like, I'd much rather be different any other day. And I was just inspired by like the toys and the vibrancy that they gave me growing up, that I was like, I want to be like them. And then, then I'm like doing shit like, where is she? I'm collecting little freaks like this all the time. And I was like, yeah, because she's like me and she stands out. And it just evolved into Mayron sticks and paint, and here I am.
Pep, I want to tell you that I love you, and I hope that it is requited back. And I think we think about unrequited love in terms of, oh, Jesus. I think we think about unrequited love in terms of romance, but I've seen times where there's unrequited love,
friendships,
in friendships and other relationships as well. And my love for you is, I want to say it loud. I want to say it loud, clearly. I want to say it proudly. I want to make sure that you know that I have so much love for you. I was in New York City on tour recently, and being able to hang out with you that whole day was so much fun. That was just like such a bright spot in my how touring can get really monotonous, and you can get really lonely. But walking around, I did not wear the right shoes.
And I wore those same shoes the other day. Not the same ones, much cheaper. But I was tripping up the steps.
I did not wear the right shoes.
Well, thank you. I love you two eternally. And I'm just so happy that you're in my life and that we have each other. I mean, you are romantically claimed, which presents a whole nother set of gifts and challenges, I'm sure. But for those of us that are seeking love in unconventional ways, I'm just really grateful to have you. You fucking bitch.
Thank you. I would like to give a shout out to some of our listeners, and a lot of you write us really beautiful things. I want to read some of the wonderful words that one of you written us. Hello, beautiful souls. I just want to thank you for your podcast. You really give me life and help me connect to my history and roots, because even though my father lived in Houston, I was born and raised in Germany in a small town near Munich, and almost everyone around me was white and straight. And I don't know what you know about Germany, but people here tend to be a little stiffer. Okay, a lot stiffer. It's hard to find your tribe and yourself in this environment. So without all the strong and beautiful Black voices from America, I would have been even more lost. And I'm sure that your podcast helps a lot of people who feel really lonely or lost. So thank you. You are super inspiring. You encourage me to work on my own projects about finding identity between the continents and fighting loneliness. So thank you. Lots of love and take care. Heart emoji. Oh, that's so sweet. I do love that. That means a lot. It feels like what we're doing is connecting, even across the Atlantic Ocean.
That is super sweet. We, like Bob said, we love to hear these things from you all. So keep leaving stuff in the comments on these clips, and share this podcast as much as possible. And if you have any suggestions about things you'd like to hear us talk about, then send us that message too. We don't have an official suggestion box, but I guess our DMs is it now. So reach out.
And I want to give some special thanks to our production team, Charlene Westbrook, Tracy Marquez, Amelia Ritaller, and Corey Nixon. And of course, our music is always by
La Femme There. Thank you so much for tuning in to our season 3 premiere. If you are just checking this out for the first time, you got to go back and listen to season 1 and 2, because we tackled some really, really, really good stuff. And if you like this episode, and if you liked season 1 and 2, then y'all ain't ready for season 3. So please share this so that everybody can hear it. And we'll see you on the next episode.
And if you'd ever like to see a live podcast, let us know. Maybe we can make it